If you would, recognize yourself and who you're with and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Michael Gibbins. I'm the Vice President of the Arkansas State Fraternal Order of Police. First, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak here today. Again, my name is Michael Gibbins. I'm the Vice President of the Arkansas Fraternal Order of Police, the representative body of over 3,500 men and women in blue who proudly serve the state of Arkansas. I also serve as the President of the North Little Rock Fraternal Order of Police, where I'm a proud member of the North Little Rock Police Department. I've been with North Little Rock for 31 years. The last 26 years of my service, I've been assigned to the Homicide Division. In the last 15 years, I've also served simultaneously as a task force officer of the ATF out of Little Rock. I come for you today to speak against Senate Bill 399, the Anti-ATF Commandeering Act. There are many reasons why we're against the passage of the act, but for the sake of time, I'll cover just some of the major issues. But by eliminating the ability for law enforcement to work with ATF on firearm-related crimes by both enforcement and material aid, this bill will have lasting effects on local law enforcement that will carry on for decades. To cover some of the points, one, I want to speak about the National Integrated Ballistic Network, the NIBIN system. If you're not familiar with NIBIN is a system that is utilized by law enforcement across the country to basically connect crimes together. When expended shell casings are recovered from crime scenes such as robberies, homicides, violent crimes, those casings are entered by the local agency into NIBIN, which is owned and operated by the ATF. What that machine does is it basically takes the fingerprint of those shell casings and it compares it to all of the shell casings that have been submitted to the NIBIN system, and it links crimes. I can count thousands of cases over the past decade that local authorities have been able to connect together, Little Rock, North Little Rock, Pulaski County, and so on, to each other's cases. What that does for us is if I have a homicide in North Little Rock and I have no information, but that is tied to a case that happened in Little Rock the week before, we can now reach out to our counterparts to find out what leads they have. And that just keeps trickling down. That provides tons of information to us and has assisted us in many ways to solve cases. Again, that is owned and operated by the Department of Justice, ATF. I'll also add in that Senator Bozeman has had a liaison ATF officer in his office for over a decade now. And he has been a strong supporter of the NIBIN system and the NIBIN machines, and has helped us get those in here, extra ones here in the state, especially a new one up towards northwest Arkansas. But again, we lose Act 399 will cause us not to have the ability to utilize the NIBIN system. Firearms such as machine guns. I'm pretty sure everyone here is familiar with Glock switches and not drop-in auto sears. These are small little mechanisms that come for less than $150 or can be made for 5 cents in your home with a 3D printer. Those little mechanisms make a semi-automatic pistol shoot as a machine gun. That puts over 100 rounds in less than 10 seconds down range. Arkansas, especially the central Arkansas area, has seen over a 300% increase in the use of these weapons. Arkansas does have a machine gun law on the books, except the punishment for it so far to the county circuit courts have pretty much been probation. Whereas we take those cases federal with our joint federal partners in the federal system, who is sending a very strong message that these type of guns in the hands of illegal individuals will not be allowed, and are starting the minimum sentence at 2 years. And that's for somebody with no criminal record. Arkansas law also does not address the simple possession of the switches themselves. The switches, again, on the market are sold between $250 and $1,000 a piece. An individual stopped by local law enforcement on the side of the road that's in possession, say, of a dozen of these, has no jurisdiction and cannot charge that as a machine gun. We have to partner with the ATF, who has that ability, because under federal law, that mechanism is considered a machine gun and has statutory regulations on it. That allows us to prosecute individuals who are using these guns in violent crimes. Again, Act 399 will prevent us from joining our partnerships with the federal agencies to do that. It was touched on earlier a little bit about bombings and arsons and incendiary devices, such as pipe bombs and Molotov cocktails. Under federal law, these types of devices are classified as firearms. By refusing local law enforcement the ability to share information with ATF, we cannot use the ATF to help investigate those. The problem comes as the Arkansas State Crime Lab does not identify like pipe bombs and Molotov cocktails as explosives. That's not in their preview. It requires the ATF to do that. ATF is the leading investigating federal entity with the federal government as ordered by the Department of Justice on these type of cases. To give you an example of how that affects us here, if you go back to 2020 during the riots that rocked the state of Arkansas, especially here in the capital city, Little Rock, North Rock, and Arkansas State Police vehicles were targeted and were bombed by protesters, specifically certain leaders that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Without the ATF, Little Rock, North Rock, the state of police, and the citizens of Arkansas would have received no justice against those individuals who caused almost $1 million in damage to police equipment. Firearm possession by violent criminals. Much too often, in many cases, law enforcement investigations involving the possession, trafficking, and use of firearms by violent criminals that the state cannot properly deal with. Due to the great partnership we have with the ATF, we're allowed to put those violent criminals in federal custody. And I know we want to keep it short. Just give you a quick example. If two individuals are meeting to sell large amounts of quantities of drugs, they both possess firearms. One ends up getting shot and killed. I've had several cases like that where the state cannot prosecute because you cannot determine who is the instigator in the incident. We take those cases federal to the ATF or even the FBI DA and file it as possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug crime, which carries mandatory federal sentences. In the state, those murders would have never been prosecuted if it wasn't for our joint partnerships with the ATF. The ATF has routinely responded to active scenes such as officer-involved shootings, where an officer was shot, shootings or an active shooter situation at schools, hospitals, shopping malls, and even escaped prisoners. Their involvement and ability to assist in these situations is critical. Senate Bill 399 will no longer allow Arkansas law enforcement to provide information to ATF personnel who are there to assist and further the investigation. I understand that there is an exception to the bill that allows for cooperation to assist in, quote, helping individuals escape a serious imminent risk of life-threatening injury. However, who decides when that imminent risk is over? Do I, as a local law enforcement officer, stand losing my career and being fined under this statute because we didn't deem that the emergency was over at the time, say someone else does? Therefore, when I release information to ATF personnel to assist in the capture or assist in the investigation of a violent criminal who just shot up a school, am I going to be held accountable because I declared when the emergency was over? Again, Bill 399 severely cripples Arkansas law enforcement. Senate Bill 399 will also prohibit probation, parole, the prisons, and the jails from providing extremely important information to assist law enforcement and the ATF in their activity. By its wording, it also bars law enforcement working with ATF from obtaining or sharing information from ACIC. If an ATF agent is on the side of the road wanting to run a warrant on an individual who I have capital murder warrants on, by statute, that information cannot be released to the ATF if that person has a warrant, and they will be released. Again, Bill 399 does law enforcement no good. The bill also recently conflicts with Senate Bill 426, which was proposed this week and endorsed by the governor to demand local law enforcement will cooperate with ICE. It's odd to see a bill saying we will cooperate with this agency and not cooperate with another. And to add on to that, if ICE comes across an individual who has a firearm, they pull in the ATF. So does the DEA, so does the FBI, so does the U.S. Attorney's Office. Why? Because ATF is the one who can advise who manufactures the firearm and that it affected interstate nexus, and that's what gives it jurisdiction. By Act 399, we can no longer provide information to ATF or ICE or DEA or FBI on a local investigation if the ATF is involved. Again, hampering our partnership with the feds. I hear a lot of testimony over basically this bill is being proposed in protest of the Malinowski case. Full disclosure, I am one of the task officers that was involved in that shooting. I'm also the agent, task force officer, who first opened that case. This was not a federal case. This was a case that was initiated out of North Little Rock based on information received from an FFL who felt it was not right that an individual was commonly selling guns without a license when they have to pay the taxes, when they have to do the right thing. This case did not, again, not initiate with ATF. It was a North Little Rock case. ATF started receiving information a couple of weeks after we did about what was going on. There are emails between myself and the chief of police of North Little Rock that can verify this. So I'm not sure where anybody's getting that this originated at ATF and this was ATF coming into the state. I can tell you as a task force officer for 15 years, I have never been ordered or directed to do anything by the ATF that is in direct violation of my oath of office, of my rules and regulations I must follow with North Little Rock. Matter of fact, ATF at every briefing quickly points out, if anything that we're talking about is in direct violation of your department, let's discuss it. They will not put you in a position to do it. I can opt in or I can opt out of any operation. It was mentioned earlier about receiving the policy of the ATF and Department of Justice on body cameras. To clarify that, there is a policy in place. That policy was put in place in anticipation of getting cameras. There are emails, if anyone ever goes down that path, to look where those cameras were being rolled out. ATF in Little Rock was set to get them in the first year part of 2027. You are rolling out 4,000 body cameras across the country. They can't be done at once. Those policies are put in place before the cameras are put out so everybody knows the rules and we can begin training. This is standard in law enforcement in general. My department puts policies and regulations out ahead of anything changing so people can become familiar with it.
Can we get back on the bill a little more specifically?
Yes, sir. Based on those facts, again, on behalf of 3,500 men and women that I proudly represent, we are speaking against Bill 399. I stand for any questions.
Thank you. First, we have Senator Rice.
Thanks for being here, Mr. Gibbins.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're well prepared, and I would call you gun-ho. Nothing wrong with that. What you do at the line of work is dangerous and does protect citizens. But I've got a couple of questions. And I'm going to go back to the case that has brought this bill. A prominent citizen who, best of my recollection, made over $250,000 a year for his job, did a good job, worked his way up, had a routine most days. I'm guessing he left his house, I don't know, but 7 a.m. maybe. I bet he left his house within a few minutes at the same time every day to get out to the airport to work. Why? When somebody's not been charged, you're just looking for evidence, why would somebody in law enforcement not take a common sense option to walk up to him while he's walking out to his car to get in and say, we need to go back in your house, I've got a warrant to go in there? Why did this have to all come about? Did somebody not have common sense? And a man is dead, and his wife is a widow, and it's not the first time it's happened, and I don't want to see law enforcement in Arkansas hampered. Why did this happen? You're saying you were there on the task force. Why did it happen?
Senator, I think the only person that can answer that question is Brian Malinowski himself. He chose to pick up that gun and fire upon law enforcement officers who were doing their legal duties and following the law. So I think only Mr. Malinowski can answer that question. In regards to the steps we took, this is not a 1-minute decision on how we're going to execute a search warrant, how we're going to carry it out, or the things we're going to do. There's discussion for weeks leading up to it. There is what's called pre-surveillance. We can't just take Mr. Malinowski and his family into account on when and how we're going to do certain things. But we also have to take into account patterns of life. Mr. Malinowski did not leave to work at 7 a.m. He was not your standard person. He was far from the standard person. And I think that when all the facts of this case come out, that people see that, it's shocking that people make so many judgments without having all the facts. And I get it. I mean, it is alarming. And I understand that. A gentleman was killed. An agent was shot. 4 of us were almost killed at the same time by Mr. Malinowski. So I think you can only ask Mr. Malinowski, who was performing criminal acts prior to this. That's what led law enforcement there. It wasn't ATF targeting, even no threat targeting. It was the public who were to protect, who reached out to us saying, this isn't right. We want this investigated. You don't always have an arrest warrant or someone, you don't have all the facts during an investigation. That's why it's called an investigation. And sometimes execution of search warrants is what helps produce more evidence over something we have. You have to have a good amount of probable cause to obtain the search warrant. On a local level, arrest warrants are obtained daily. On the federal level, not so much. There are lots of hurdles to jump on the federal level to get a search warrant. There's a lot of people involved. A lot of people review it. Not counting, at the end of the day, a federal judge deems if we have got enough facts to enter someone's home. In this case, and I believe, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, I believe it was Miss Reed had testified, was to protect her and her children and family from this. Well, there's a lot of things. Miss Reed's not out breaking the law. Number two, we look at the fact, are there kids present in the home? We look at anyone that's present. We look at animals. That's the number one thing we look at. What's the pattern of life? Who's in the house? Who's likely, if something was to go wrong, we have contingency plans. Who would be affected? Then we go outside the house and we look at the houses immediately in the area. We look at when people are leaving to go to work, when kids are getting out on and off a bus. We're looking when people are out jogging, exercising. We look at a laundry list of things to do everything we can to protect everyone involved.
I will just go back to my statement, and I believe it more now after listening to you than before. I believe you are gun-ho. I believe you're overly gun-ho. And I know what you do is dangerous. But what happened and what can happen again is dangerous to citizens. With the amount of information you had, and I hope it comes out, but there were other options. And what you've said here, I believe, and I've gotten out of your statement, you weren't willing to listen to those options. You weren't willing to take in consideration there's other ways to do this. And you keep saying, only one that can answer that's Brian Malinowski. He can't answer that. The man's dead. He's been dead a year. And the only reason he shot at you is because you busted in his door and didn't even give him time to get to the door. And in this city, if somebody comes busting in my door, I'd be firing too, because it's a more dangerous city than the little place I live in. And I hate to have to be this way against law enforcement. But you've seared in my mind that you need somebody with a more rational thought on this. I'm sorry, but that's what I have gotten out of this conversation.
Senator Rice, I apologize.
I'm sorry. He was making a statement and didn't have a question. So we've got a few others that have some questions, if you don't mind. Senator Wallace, do you still have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You used the term FFL, and I was not familiar with that term.
Federal Firearm Licensee.
Okay.
All right. Senator Stubblefield, you had a question? Okay. All right. Any other questions of the committee? If not, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.